Two men who played best friends for 26 years chose to be buried next to each other in the village where they had filmed the show. That is the kind of story Last of the Summer Wine never told you. For 37 years and 295 episodes, it was the gentlest show on British television. 3 old men, a Yorkshire village, and every single word written by one man across 4 decades. But behind the wrinkly stockings and the tin baths lies a story nobody told you. A cast member who filmed his final scenes while secretly dying, a political argument so fierce it nearly destroyed the show before anyone saw a single episode, and a BBC cancellation after Series 1 that almost ended the world's longest sitcom before it began. Stay with us. This is the real story of Last of the Summer Wine. Fact 1. Every single episode was written by one man. Let's start with the achievement that defines the entire show. Clarke wrote every single episode of Last of the Summer Wine, all 295 of them, across 37 years, without exception. This is almost without parallel in television history. Shows of comparable length, soap operas, long-running procedurals, used teams of writers rotating across series. Clarke sat down alone and wrote every line of dialogue, every comic situation, every gentle Yorkshire observation that the show ever produced. He also wrote Keeping Up Appearances, Open All Hours, and Still Open All Hours simultaneously, making him by any measure one of the most prolific comedy writers in the history of British television. Fact 2. The show nearly never happened because of a political argument. Here is the fact that stops most people cold. The show's original trio, Bill Owen as Compo, Peter Sallis as Clarke, and Michael Bates as Blaumeyer, were deeply divided along political lines. Bill Owen was an active, committed supporter of the Labour Party. Michael Bates held strongly conservative right-wing views. Their political disagreements during the making of the pilot episode were, according to Peter Sallis, so fierce and so sustained that the show nearly collapsed before it had started. Sallis later said directly that Owen and Bates clashed so severely over their political differences that the production was genuinely in jeopardy. 2 elderly men playing friends who bickered gently about nothing in particular were, in real life, engaged in a genuinely hostile ideological argument that threatened to destroy the show before anyone had seen a single episode. Fact 3. Michael Bates was secretly dying. Michael Bates played Blaumeyer, the pompous, regimented former soldier who served as the self-appointed leader of the trio for the first 3 series of the show. By 1976, it was clear that something was wrong. Bates was visibly struggling with the strenuous location filming across the Yorkshire hills. The cancer that would eventually kill him had already taken hold, and the physical demands of filming in Holmfirth were becoming impossible. He was quietly written out of the show. His absence was explained within the narrative without drama or announcement. He continued appearing in It Ain't Half Hot Mum for a period after leaving Summer Wine, but his health deteriorated rapidly. He died in 1978. The man who played the most physically dominant character in the show's original trio was, during much of his time on screen, secretly seriously ill. Fact 4. Bill Owen filmed his final scenes while dying of cancer. The connection between Last of the Summer Wine and the deaths of its cast members runs deeper than most fans realize. Bill Owen, who played Compo for the entire run of his character across 26 years, was filming a special French episode for the Millennium celebrations in 2000 when he fell seriously ill on location. He insisted on continuing despite being in considerable pain. When he returned to England, he was confirmed as having both pancreatic and bowel cancer. He died on the 12th of July, 1999. His final scenes, filmed while he was already seriously ill, were among the last footage of Compo ever recorded. He was 85 years old. His real-life son, Tom Owen, was approached just days after his father's funeral and asked to join the cast as Compo's fictional long-lost son. Tom Owen thought about it for 2 seconds and said yes. He played the role for 10 years. Fact 5. Bill Owen and Peter Sallis are buried side by side. Here is the fact that is, in every sense, the most quietly moving in the show's entire history. Bill Owen's last wish was to be buried in Yorkshire, specifically in the churchyard of St. John's Parish Church in Upperthong, near Holmfirth. Not because he was from Yorkshire, he was a Londoner born in Acton, but he had fallen so completely in love with the village and the community that had hosted the show for over 2 decades that he chose to remain there permanently. He was buried in Holmfirth in 1999. When Peter Sallis died in June 2017 at the age of 96, he chose to be buried in the adjacent grave. The 2 men who had played Compo and Clarke, who had walked the same Yorkshire hills, argued the same gentle arguments, and made the same audiences laugh for a quarter of a century, are buried next to each other in the village that had been the home of their show. Subscribe if you want more. There's plenty more where this came from. Fact 6. Peter Sallis was also the voice of Wallace. Peter Sallis played Norman Clegg, the quiet, sensible, perpetually put-upon member of the trio, from the very first episode in 1973 to the very last in 2010. He appeared in all 295 episodes. He was the only cast member to do so. He was also, simultaneously, the voice of Wallace in the Oscar-winning Wallace and Gromit animations. For decades, the same man was both the gentle, hapless Clegg in a BBC sitcom and the cheese-obsessed inventor in a series of animated films that won 4 Academy Awards. Nick Park, the creator of Wallace and Gromit, described Sallis as having naturally funny bones. He said it as a compliment and meant it as the highest possible praise. Sallis died in June 2017 at the age of 96. He was still working until shortly before his death. Fact 7. Nora Batty's wrinkly stockings were deliberate. Nora Batty, Compo's formidable, permanently resistant love interest, was defined above all by one piece of costuming: her wrinkled stockings. The stockings were not an accident. They were a deliberate creative choice that became one of the most recognizable pieces of costuming in British television comedy history. Kathy Staff, who played Nora Batty from the first series until her death in 2008, wore the wrinkled stockings in every single appearance. Bill Owen and Kathy Staff even recorded a novelty song together in 1983 called, inevitably, Nora Batty's Stockings. Staff's daughter has spoken about how the character made her mother an unlikely pin-up. Nora Batty's wrinkled stockings became, for a generation of viewers, a shorthand for a specific kind of Yorkshire formidability. Kathy Staff, a quiet, warm, deeply private woman, found herself famous for the most unglamorous garment in British television history. Fact 8. The show was based on Holmfirth and transformed it. Last of the Summer Wine was filmed almost entirely in and around Holmfirth, a real market town in West Yorkshire that was suggested as a filming location by broadcaster Barry Took, who had recently documented the area in a BBC documentary. The effect on Holmfirth was extraordinary and sustained. What had been a quiet, largely unknown Yorkshire market town became, over 37 years, one of the most recognized television locations in Britain. Tourists came from across the country and eventually from across the world to walk the streets, visit Sid's Cafe, and stand where Compo had stood. Holmfirth summer wine tourism became a significant economic factor for the town. The cafe used in the show, still operating, remained a major attraction for years after the show ended, and the churchyard where Bill Owen and Peter Sallis are buried became quietly a place of pilgrimage for fans who wanted to pay their respects. Fact 9. The BBC cancelled it, then immediately brought it back. Last of the Summer Wine was cancelled by the BBC in 1973. After the very first series, the corporation decided the show was too gentle, too slow, and too limited in its appeal to justify continuation. Then the repeat broadcasts aired. Audiences who had missed the first run caught up with the show and responded with enough warmth and enthusiasm that the BBC reversed its decision. A second series was commissioned. The longest-running sitcom in television history was cancelled after its first series. Without the repeat audience that changed the BBC's mind, the show would have ended after 13 episodes and 1973. Fact 10. The show was surpassed by The Simpsons in 2020. Last of the Summer Wine held the Guinness World Record as the longest-running sitcom in television history for a significant period after its 2010 cancellation. In 2020, The Simpsons surpassed it, becoming the longest-running sitcom in history by episode count. The record, held by 3 elderly men falling down Yorkshire hills in a tin bath, was eventually broken by a yellow animated family in Springfield, USA. Roy Clarke, who wrote all 295 episodes, was characteristically understated about the record being broken. He was already in his 80s. He had written more sitcom episodes than almost any other writer in history. He did not appear unduly concerned about The Simpsons. Fact 11. The political divide nearly destroyed the show more than once. The original political tension between Bill Owen and Michael Bates did not disappear when Bates left the show. Owen remained an active Labour supporter throughout his time on Summer Wine, and the broader cast, drawn from across the political spectrum, occasionally made for a complicated working environment. Peter Sallis, who positioned himself as the peacemaker between Owen and Bates in the early years, later described the experience of managing those relationships as considerably more demanding than playing Clegg had ever been. The show that looked like the gentlest, most uncontroversial program on British television was, behind the scenes, occasionally a considerably more contested environment than anything that appeared on screen. Fact 12. It spawned a prequel series nobody remembers. In 1988, the BBC produced a prequel series called First of the Summer Wine, and set in the same Yorkshire world. but showing the characters as young men in the 1930s. Peter Sallis appeared in it, playing Clegg's father rather than Clegg himself. The prequel ran for 2 series of 6 episodes each, then quietly disappeared. Most fans of the original show have never seen it. Most people who know about it have forgotten it existed. The world's longest-running sitcom produced a prequel that lasted 12 episodes and left almost no trace on British television history. Fact 13. The show featured some of Britain's best-loved comic actors. Over 37 years and 31 series, Last of the Summer Wine attracted an extraordinary range of guest and supporting performers. Thora Hird, one of Britain's most beloved character actresses, played Edie Pegden across multiple series. Frank Thornton, best known as Captain Peacock in Are You Being Served?, joined the regular cast in later years as Truly True Love, and Jean Alexander, Coronation Street's Hilda Ogden, appeared in guest roles. The show that appeared to be the gentlest and most undemanding on British television quietly attracted some of the finest comic performers of their generation, because Roy Clarke's writing, however gentle its surface, offered genuinely well-crafted roles for actors who knew what good comedy looked like. Fact 14. The show outlasted everything around it. Last of the Summer Wine began broadcasting in 1973. In that same year, the Watergate scandal was unfolding in America. Britain was in the grip of industrial unrest. The 3-day week was imminent. By the time the show ended in 2010, the world had changed beyond recognition. The Berlin Wall had fallen, the internet had transformed daily life, mobile phones had become ubiquitous. 3 generations of British viewers had grown up, grown old, and watched 3 elderly men navigate Yorkshire with the same gentle chaos they had always managed. The show outlasted the careers of most of its contemporaries. It outlasted the political certainties of the era in which it began. It outlasted its own cast multiple times, and it outlasted the patience of BBC commissioners on at least one occasion, before coming back anyway. Fact 15. Roy Clarke is still writing. Roy Clarke, the man who wrote every single episode of the world's longest-running sitcom, did not retire when Last of the Summer Wine ended in 2010. He continued writing Still Open All Hours, the sequel series to Open All Hours, which ran on the BBC until 2019. He was in his mid-80s when he finally stepped back from active television writing. A man who had written 295 episodes of one show while simultaneously writing multiple other series across 5 decades spent his retirement in the same way he had spent his career, quietly and productively, without much fuss, in the manner of the Yorkshire characters he had spent a lifetime creating. And those are 15 shocking facts about the world's longest-running sitcom, a show that was cancelled after its first series and ran for 37 years. That made a real Yorkshire town famous around the world. And that ended with 2 of its stars buried side by side in the churchyard of the village they had come to love. If you are a true Last of the Summer Wine fan, this channel was made for you. Subscribe and we will see you next time.